Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ivy League Analytical English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Wesley.
We are very, very lucky today because it's time for a translation exercise. Here is number 1.
好，我们看看翻译的第一题哈。他说，现今那种植小盆栽相当流行，因为它们不仅净化空气，也会使我们的心情变得开朗。
I want to mention something right at the beginning.
Yeah.
When you see this penzai, this word went into Japanese a very long time ago. And as you know, a lot of things that are now typical Japanese culture actually came from China. And when I would mention these things to my Japanese teacher years ago, not to be irritating, but he would just say, 我们日本人这个那个. I'd say, well, actually, that came from China. And he would just look at me with this unfriendly look. So it's true that many of these things in very traditional Japanese culture actually came from China. They went over starting from, say, the 9th century or so or earlier, and then they redeveloped them. They made them into something uniquely Japanese. And one of those things is penzai, which they call bonsai, B-O-N-S-A-I. But bonsai is not the same thing as penzai in modern Chinese. Bonsai are these tiny little evergreen trees, these little pine trees. They're tiny because the person who planted them and is growing them is using wire to put them, have them grow in a certain shape and to keep it as a miniature tree, very small tree.
好，所以这个看到盆栽，可能有的人会想到有一个英文字叫 bonsai 哈，那就是所谓的盆栽，不是吗？但其实不太一样哈。这个bonsai 这个东西啊，这个是传到日本去哈，那所以它其实指的是日本式的盆栽哈，就好像很多汉字传到日本去哈，你会看到那个汉字，这明明是中国字啊，可是在日本这个字其实它有别的意思。
For example, 手指.
What's that?
It means a letter, 一封信.
Oh, really?
对 that one's really confusing.
Yeah. 好，所以这个地方呢，这个
Tegami.
Yeah, 这个我们讲到这个日本的这个盆栽呢，它就是像刚刚 Karen 老师讲，它其实是一个小树哈，它是用各种方法限制那个树的生长哈，然后把它种在一个盆子里面，而且它会可能控制那个树的形状啊等等，那是一种艺术哈。那跟我们这里这个盆栽是不太一样，所以这里其实不适合用这个 bonsai 这个字来翻。
Right, because some people may think, haha, I know this word. This is a Japanese word, blah, 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 but it doesn't fit here.
Yeah, 好，所以这里呢不要用那个字来翻。那这个地方小盆栽或者是我们所谓的盆栽，英文怎么说呢？其实你可以说 potted plants。好 ，pot 就是那个盆子啊，或者是那个花盆。那 potted 就是它被放到花盆里面的 plants 那种植物。
And since you're talking about pots, we also should mention the word planter. Planter can have many different shapes. Sometimes it's very long. It's oblong. And then you can plant a whole bunch of things in it. Anything where you can put some dirt in and grow a plant in it is called a planter.
好，所以这个种花的那个东西也可以叫一个 planter 哈，它可能是长方，也可以是长方形，各种形状都有。好，那在这里呢，我们这个 potted plants 是很常见的一个说法哈，就是这个所谓的盆栽啊。所以这地方我看到说，这个现金啊，这个开头这个现金，这个其实对于某些中文的 writer 来讲，这个现金其实没什么意思，就他一开头就现金啊，好像在跟你讲说，哎呀，这伟大的事情。那翻成英文的话呢，这个现金啊，重点就是各位看到现金啊，不是说一定要翻 nowadays.
Right, and we just had, not we, you and Bruce just had this discussion on the day that we recorded this program. Because I was listening to Ivy before I came here to record today, and I heard exactly this discussion. And you said, nowadays actually sounds a little old-fashioned, but Bruce likes it. So don't be shocked when you run into this, because native speakers often differ in their perceptions of all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Does that mean that, well, you can do whatever you want? No. You know, each one, 它都有它的道理. But pay attention to the majority.
Yeah. 那所以呢，在这里呢，其实用 now 也就可以了。尤其是说现在相当流行，你可以说 something is now very popular 就解决了。
Now is good, but you'll hear my own preference when we get to my translation.
Okay.
Let's start with Wesley's.
Yeah, 好，那这个，所以当我要讲说 something is now very popular， 那我前面就这个 something 就一定是个名词性质的东西，所以在这里种植小盆栽，那这个种植我就要把它变成动名词啊，变成动名词片语当名词来用，所以变成 growing small potted plants 啊，那这因为是小的，所以是 small。好，所以这很流行，因为怎么样？他们不但会净化空气，那很简单，净化空气就 purify the air。好，所以 because they not only purify the air, but also 让我们的心情变得开朗。哈，英文有一个片语叫做 brighten up someone's spirits， 就是让他的心情，这个 spirits 在这里是 心情，当然也有一点精神的意思啊，但是它主要是指心情，那通常会加 s， 所以 brighten up our spirits， 那就是让我们心情变得开朗。所以这句话的整句我再念一遍哈。Growing small potted plants is now very popular because they are not only purify the air, but also brighten up our spirits.
Now, I had a look at Wesley's translation before the program, and I actually Googled brighten up our spirits because it didn't totally resonate with me. It sounded okay, but something wasn't quite right. I think it's because it's probably more British.
Oh, really?
Probably. I'm just guessing because there's something about it that made me want to Google it.
I have no idea where I picked it up.
Oh, okay. I think it's probably more British, but I'm not totally sure of that. There's just something that made me want to Google it.
Oh.
But it's fine. Here's my translation. Growing small indoor plants is quite popular these days since they help clean the air and are also mood enhancing. Now, be careful with this because I picked this on purpose to teach you a new word. However, mood enhancing is usually used in a different context. It's usually used in the context of illegal drugs.
OK， 所以这 mood enhancing 哈，这个字呢，通常会常常会看到那种你吸食那种毒品的 illegal drugs 的情况之下我们会讲说这些毒品是 mood enhancing 但这个当然不是唯一的用法，但是大家看到这个字的时候呢，这个可以知道说很多时候会造成这种联想。
That's right. So I used it because it's still a perfectly good adjective, but keep in mind that it's kind of got those associations. So here's my translation again. Growing small indoor plants is quite popular these days since they help clean the air and are also mood enhancing. Now, I picked quite because it says 相当 in Chinese.
Oh, yeah.
And 相当 is often quite, but you don't have to be mechanical about it. You can sometimes use other translations.
好，所以现在其实看到 Karen 老师他这个相当用 quite 来翻，我觉得这个其实用 quite 比较对，因为我翻成 very popular 就变得是非常流行，就很流行了所以这个地方 quite 会比 very 好 ，very 当然不能说错，因为相当在中文里面也是一个这个也状况也是蛮厉害的蛮受欢迎的。
Right, and indoor plants is another way of saying potted. Now, they aren't necessarily always in pots, but they usually are. So that's just a different way of making it clear where the plants are. If you just say growing small plants, it could be out in the garden, but they're inside.
Yeah, 那 Karen 老师他这里说这个 growing small indoor plants， 这个也是加了一个 indoor 也很漂亮就表示是室内的。那盆栽都是放在室内，通常放室内，当然也有人会把它放到室外。但在这个地方呢，尤其是你跟它后面的句子连接的话，这里用 indoor 也是蛮好的。那还有一个地方很特别，各位注意到 Karen 老师的现今怎么翻呢？
Okay. These days, and that's right, because I mentioned it earlier. I should follow up. These days, for me, is the most common, the most colloquial way to say 现今 or 今即日 or something like that. When you're talking about 最近 or these days, well, there you go. These days is what I say. So it's really popular these days.
所以呢，以后各位看到现今呢，各位可以试试用这个 these days 来翻
In addition, the word nowadays, when I say it, at least in the past, I didn't usually add the It was just nowadays.
Oh, okay.
So in colloquial English, at least in my experience in my dialect, we'd say, oh, nowadays nobody does that. Nobody does that nowadays. I don't have the in there. Putting the in there makes it even more old-fashioned.
好，所以这以后各位念这个字这个 nowadays 那个 a 要把它拿掉所以呢，这样念起来会让这个字更年轻一点。
比较口语一点。Well, 年轻 is very relative here. Okay, so my translation one more time. Growing small indoor plants is quite popular these days since they help clean the air and are also mood enhancing. Now, like I said, every time I see mood enhancing, I do think of drugs. However, it still works here. Let's look at the translation in our magazine. Nowadays, growing small plants is quite popular because they not only purify the air, but also put us in a good mood.
好，所以这个 put us in a good mood 就让我们心情很好
Okay, let's go on to number 2.
第二题此外呢，小盆栽也可以用来装饰我们的桌子，增添我们的生活的乐趣。那这个地方呢，当然这个此外你当然可以说 moreover 或者 in addition 也可以但这个地方呢，因为前面只有一句，那你这个地方再加一个此外，加一个 moreover， 我是觉得好像有点大材小用。
Overkill.
Overkill.
It's overkill.
杀鸡用了牛刀。
That's right, because moreover is a very, very formal word. And even when I'm writing a very formal piece of writing, I tend to avoid it. So you can use it and it'll probably get you through the test fine. The teacher will be expecting it and you put it in and it's fine. But this is now advice from a native speaker. Avoid it when you don't need it.
Yeah. 好，所以刚刚 Karen 老师讲的很重要，就是 moreover 是很正式的一个字，而且是正式文章里面有这种很正式的推论的时候会用的。那当然考试的时候你写这 moreover 是没有什么问题，因为很多阅卷老师会 expect 你要写这个字出来。好，只是说各位用这个字的时候，你要知道说，这真正的在 real life English 里面，其实 moreover 不是常见的一个字。
Especially in speaking, but even in writing, I tend to avoid it when I can. Now, this brings us back to what we keep attacking, and that is the test system. Now, it is not all bad because in a way it's fair because everybody takes the same test. And that determines your next step. But the question is, what is in the test?
Yeah.
The things that are in the test are things that are easy to test. Now, what are things that are easy to test? A lot of details that tell you nothing about your overall English ability. So there was an example that came up in class yesterday. A lot of students don't know when you add a final S, 什么时候要念作是，什么时候念作日，什么时候念作 is. For example, bushes. 你不是 bushes, 对不对? Nobody in the class learned it in school. Nobody.
Really?
同样是那个加 ed 有时候念特 like looked. 有时候念的 for example, begged. 有时候念 for example, patted. Okay, 三个不同的念法. Not one person in the class had learned it in school. One person said, I learned it in a 补习班.
Really? What happened? I learned it at school.
Things have changed, obviously.
这些基本的东西我也很讶异，居然他们在学校都没有学过。这些东西很重要，你那个 S 念的对不对啊？其实会让这个 native speaker 更容易了解或者更不容易了解你讲的东西。
Well, let's just compare it to something in Chinese. Let's say 那个两个三声变成二声加三声。For example, if somebody says, 你今天好吗？很好。我真的很好。
Yeah.
How do you feel when you hear, 我很好，我很好。
Yeah. 所以这个，例如说我们讲很好。这两个都是三声，可是放在一起的时候，这个第一个三声会变得像二声一样，所以我们是说你好吗？我很好，很好是很好。但你如果说我很好，那就很奇怪了。
It's even impossible for you to read it because it's so strange.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that is one of the most basic things that we learn in first-year Chinese. And this SED issue should be one of the most basic things you learn in your first semester of English.
Yeah, that's when I learned it.
That's when you should have learned it.
好吧，我们回来看看这个句子。不过这个句子倒是还蛮好翻的哈。那小盆栽哈 ，small plants 啊，这个地方这个其实你也把这个 potted 加进去也没有错哈。Small potted plants can also be used to 也可以被用来干嘛呢 ？Decorate 就是这个装饰 ，decorate our desks。然后呢，这个增添我们生活的情绪啊，我们可以说 enrich our lives。enrich 就让它更丰富，也就是让增加。通常是 enrich our lives， 通常是指好的事情嘛。所以就添增了我们生活的乐趣。那我们这个句子我再整个再念一遍哈。Small potted plants can also be used to decorate our desks and enrich our lives.
Here's my translation. Small plants can also decorate our desks, adding beauty and interest to our lives. My original was small plants can also decorate our tables, adding beauty and interest to our lives.
And table, yeah, 应该也没错啦。
But I think you guys have the native feel about it.
OK， 好，那这个地方 Karen 老师用的 adding beauty and interest to our lives， 对，为我们的生活增加了美丽跟这个乐趣哈 interest。
So one more time. Small plants can also decorate our tables, adding beauty and interest to our lives. Here's the translation in our magazine. Moreover, small plants can be used to decorate our desks as well, which adds fun to our lives. And that's it for today. And we'll see you next time. Tune in then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.